Well, thanks everybody for joining us. I think you've heard a lot about many different things today, and usually people leave us and they're scared. So I'm Michelle Reed. I co-lead our cyber and privacy group at Akin. With us today is Josh Olds, who's president and CEO and founder of USI, John Perez, who's the technical program manager at Dark Wolf Solutions, Tom Dukes, who's an attorney at BizTech Lawyers, Tom Frooninckx, who's an executive VP at TruWeather Solutions, and Alistair Blundy, who's the CEO of Skyrisks. So we have a really great panel today who's going to help us walk through kind of all of these issues that we're going to talk about. So and then I guess you can get our bios right here, I think through the QR code if you want to find more details on that. So let's jump right in and talk a little bit about what we think can happen. Murphy's law always says that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And ultimately, that's what we see and plan for. So maybe I can direct this to some of our panel here. Whether vehicles are crewed or uncrewed, accidents can happen. And how do you prepare for the safest operations possible? That's what everybody wants. Planning ahead to prevent incidents or to manage incidents and having policies to address when they do happen can all go a long way to ultimately shield drone and air taxi businesses from potential liability. This panel is going to address a broad range of topics that help everyone to keep their business, organization, and endeavor them to be legally compliant. So let's jump in and sort of start with talking about risk mitigation. Josh, I want to start with you and discuss the training and safety management systems to make aviation businesses a success. First, let's start out with what is an SMS?
So SMS stands for Safety Management System. Safety management systems are really a strategic or structured process for rolling out procedures and ways of mitigating risk within an operation. So SMS, 4 pillars. This is traditional aviation, but you have safety promotion, safety policy, safety assurance, and then safety risk management. So those are the 4 pillars. If you've been in a safety management systems class in aviation, right? Yeah, I see some shaking heads. Those are the premise of aviation safety management systems, but we'll get into how they are deployed inside of a UAS operation because there are some differences.
Well, since this is a legal and technical conference, I think the next question is, is there some kind of legal requirement for a drone or air taxi business to have an SMS or some kind of risk management system?
So under Part 107, there's not. There are, pieces of, pre-flight risk assessment and some components that could be considered part of SMS. They actually just announced today, the article just came out, that SMS is now going to be a requirement for certain air carrier. Literally just came out from the FAA today. So that will be required for like Part 135. Now, this is traditional aviation, but you're going to see the impact, ramifications of this inside of emerging tech as we move into the future.
Well, so if it's not legally required, then why is it a good idea?
So business continuity is critical, right? Why do you deploy drones in the first place? It's about making money, saving money, or reducing hazard hours. So when you look at the purpose of remotely piloted technology, SMS creates a structured process in which we deploy technology. And we look at it in really 3 main pillars. So you have organizational, you have technology, and you have personnel. So when you look at SMS and how it deploys across these 3 main verticals, what we're talking about is a systematic way of deploying technology that allows us to have a safety policy around how we deploy that technology, and then safety assurance, how we're measuring that, how we're recording that information to come back in time and say, are we really being safe? Are we making ourselves safe? Are we improving our safety culture from an operational perspective? So the reason why is there's multiple layers of that, but if we look at the reasons or how we deploy an SMS inside of an operation, it can look very different in a Part 107 operation versus a waiverable Part 107 operation versus a Part 135 package delivery company versus a 91 waiver. We even ag spraying under 137. So we have all these different ways that we operate drone technology. How that SMS, that safety management system, gets deployed in all of those operations may look a little bit different, but what is our purpose? Our purpose is to drive a sustainable operation that's here for longer than 3 months, right? We want an operation that's 3 years and is continuous. And so we want a sustainable, repeatable operation. That's where SMS comes in.
Well, you have us all convinced now. We all want to mitigate our risk, and we all want to set this
Job
up.
well done.
So the next question is, what are some of the best practices on how to do that? So I want to do it. How do I do it?
So this can look different under each of these pillars, but I think at a very high level, how do things get done is it's creating documentation and then implementing. I think one of the keys to safety management systems is it's one thing to say, hey, here's how we're going to deploy a safety management system in policy, but if we don't implement that in practice, then it's kind of a one-legged stool. And so best practices are using software tools to track telemetry all the way down to fleet, fleet management, having tools like weather information that are educating your operation, especially when you start flying downrange. Using the data feeds available to you and having a risk management plan. In Europe, they've got JAR SOAR, a specific operational risk assessment, which deployed in a risk management profile is looking at not just airborne-based risk, but you're looking at ground-based risk. It's a radar matrix. It says, we're flying over people. We're flying in Class Alpha or Class Golf airspace. It starts identifying your risk profile to be very specific in nature so that you're actually addressing not just air, but also ground-based risk, and it's part of how you build that sustainable operation based on your use case. One other thing I would highlight is that it's not just aviation that's deploying this technology today, right? It's every single industry cluster that exists in the United States has a use case for emerging technology. And so because it's not just aviation, creating a shared mental model around how we deploy this technology is critical to sustainable operations for the long term.
Great. Okay. Well, that is super helpful. Well, let's pivot now to security, which is my personal favorite topic, since that's what I do day in and day out on the cyber business. And that obviously for aviation, safety is the number one job, right? We want to make sure everything's safe. And safety includes securing both the physical assets, but also the cyber assets and then the non-physical assets, and making sure ultimately that you have those cyber assets controlled. So let's ask, weather is a huge aspect of physical safety, whether to physical equipment or to people. How tell us about the risk weather can pose to our businesses. Who wants to take that one? I think that's Tom, right? Or is
yes.
That? Yep.
But can you
very good.
Just the last sentence?
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the risk that weather can pose to businesses.
Sure. Oh, that's easy, right? Well, let's see. Within the UAS industry, a normal weather person would say that the risks are very strong unexpected winds, turbulence, thunderstorms, icing, heavy precipitation, all of that when it's unexpected. Those are real risks. There's lots of, already within the last 5 years, lots of evidence of UASs having operational problems when they've encountered weather like that. The bigger risk, if you ask me, is not so much to the safety side, it's the risk to profitability. Because the aviation community and the cousins and offspring of the aviation traditional community is so prone to be risk averse, right? Safety first. Because of the uncertainty of weather conditions at the scales that drones are operating at, we are unnecessarily becoming too risk averse, saying, you know what, we're not really sure what those winds are 2, 3, 4 miles away because we don't have a weather sensor. And I'm looking at a radar and it looks like there's a thunderstorm kind of out there, but not really sure, so we're uncertain, we're not going to go. And without certainty, I don't see how the risk will allow profitability. Without profitability, the industry doesn't work. So that's not to suggest that weather is the only linchpin to the industry, but it's clear in my judgment that the first risk is all those awful types of weather that I described, hail, rain, turbulence, flip over a drone, drop a package, whatever, icing. But then the other risk is if we're too risk averse, erring on the side of safety, unnecessarily, dare I say, then you won't scale up. You won't fly enough on a given day unless companies like TruWeather, there's my in, or other weather providers step up, introduce new sensors into the ecosystem, and provide more reliability so that the uncertainty goes away.
Well, so fill in for a second. What is the biggest gap in the weather data?
Well, the answer to that question is actually dependent on where you're talking geographically, in the United States or worldwide, and the use case. But in general, to answer that question, I would say, well, is the application wind sensitive? Is it icing sensitive? Does it require 3 miles or better visibility? So is a reduced visibility, is flying into a cloud a problem? Because if flying into a cloud is a problem, then that's the answer to the question. Because right now, the number of sensors that we have located throughout a state, and we'll just talk about the United States for a moment, it's a data desert. We know what the clouds are above us. We know what the proportions are. We know what the bases. We know what the altitudes are. We don't know what they are 2 miles away, even though that official airfield observation is supposedly representative of 5 miles around the airfield. You all have probably experienced yourself in the city that you live in. You're on the phone with a friend who lives 2 miles away, and you're talking about the rainstorm, and they're saying, what are you talking about? It's sunny outside on my side of town. So, apply that to the drone business, where we have a sensor today at an airfield is not really representative of 2, 3, 4, certainly 5 miles down the road. And so if clouds are an issue, because of the nature of cloud cover, it changes literally every quarter mile. Winds, not so much. Like if the winds are right above me, 25 knots, they're probably 20 to 25 knots a half mile away. I mean, unless there's a thunderstorm or something. But cloud cover visibility, things of that nature.
I am guessing that you have a solution to us for this problem. Tell us, what is TruWeather doing to help fill some of those gaps that we just talked about?
Yeah, so TruWeather, we specialize in low altitude weather. We've been coming to this conference for 7-8 years. We're kind of a boutique company in that. And my boss, the CEO, Don Birchoff, has been a massive leader within the ecosystem with championing a new standard, an ASTM standard that we anticipate the FAA will adopt in some way to make it a regulation that new weather service providers, new companies can provide weather services when they in the past would have not been allowed to. That is, aviation companies following the Part 135, 141, 107, 108, just this disarray of confusion. The non-government, like a TruWeather, would not be allowed to officially, an operator would not be allowed to officially use TruWeather to make decisions. And the answer to your question is TruWeather and our other commercial colleagues in the community, we anticipate will be allowed, going through NTAP processes and other legalities, will be allowed to provide that. I mentioned earlier the data desert. Part of that equation is introducing additional sensors. So if we don't, we were talking about space earlier, I do have a space background. The most sophisticated sensor in space will not give us the fidelity that we need to service the lower 5,000 feet in terms of cloud cover, precipitation, visibility, and so forth. So we need to introduce ground-based sensors. TruWeather's been doing that for the last few years, and we look forward to continuing to do it.
That's great. Well, now that we know weather, it's very unpredictable. What is also very unpredictable is cybersecurity. So, John, now I'm looking at you to tell us about how all autonomous and uncrewed systems have significant cyber components. What are the cyber risks that are out there?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways you can think about cyber. I think a good place to start is think about who the bad actors may be. So you've got a broad range of potential actors. You've got nation-state level actors that will have the whole power of their government or the power of the cyber mercenaries they may hire when their governments are not equipped to have their own offensive cyber capabilities. You have private individuals. Anyone's got access to laptops nowadays. They can learn how to do this kind of stuff online. So you don't necessarily need a large pool of resources to be a cyber threat. You've got insider threats. A begruntled employee wants to fight back against their perceived wrongdoers, so they take advantage of the access that they have that the average person wouldn't. Once you think about who's out there, you start to think about, well, what kinds of things do they want to be doing? They want to be accessing data. That's either data that your drone is collecting, or it can be data that is accessible on a network that the drone is connected to. A lot of people like to think about what sensors have collected on the drone and limit their concerns there, but oftentimes a drone can just be a stepping stone. You take that back to the office and you plug it into the same network that HR runs payroll on, and now you're talking about risk of access to employee personal data. Once you've got your head around who's doing this kind of stuff, what kind of things they want to do, you want to start thinking about how they're going to do this. How do they attack your drones? Well, there's physical access, so things like USB ports that are on the drone. That's a place I can go in and plug in my devices and start wreaking mayhem. There's wireless. Most of these systems are communicating back to some kind of ground control station. If that's an unencrypted link, well, I can listen in and I can get your data that way. Or maybe I can send unauthenticated commands and cause it to start performing irregularly. I can take it over and crash it into something if I want. You have supply chain. So all the parts that make up your system, both hardware and software, are a potential target. You want to make sure that you're buying from trusted sources that have rigorous controls in place to ensure that no one is messing with that supply chain. A lot of the focus will be on the drone itself, but like I mentioned, that can be a stepping stone to networks that it gets plugged into. So you also want to think about the broader ecosystem that these drones exist in. Most of them are being developed by vendors that are writing code that gets deployed on these systems. Well, if you secure that drone and you make it a really hard target, and I'm the bad guy that's trying to wreak mayhem here, well, I'm going to stop trying to go for the drone and I'm just going to go for the company instead. An overwhelming majority of successful cyber attacks start with email. They start with phishing attempts, trying to compromise accounts that developers or the executives at like the companies that people are interested in have access to. So you want to take a really broad view of all of the different parts of your ecosystem and make sure that you're securing everything along that chain. It's a very complex situation. So one of the most important things you can do early on is get an inventory of assets, not just machine assets, but personnel as well.
So you've talked a little bit about the corporate infrastructure itself. Tell us in a little bit more detail about those corporate infrastructure risks.
Yeah, so I think there are two main categories of corporate infrastructure in this context. You have the corporate infrastructure of the people that are creating the tools you're using, so drones in this context. That's where I talked about if I send a phishing email to the head of security and he clicks the link and now I've got access and can act as the head of security, I can start to put malicious code in their repositories that will get deployed to these systems. So next time you get an update on your drone, you're like, yeah, I'm a responsible droner, I'm going to install this update. Well, if I compromise the company, that's going to look like a legitimate update, and then I'm in and can do whatever I want. The second category is the users of the systems. So there are places that will build their own drones, but a lot of companies are buying someone else's. So you want to think about the corporate infrastructure for the companies that are using these drones. If you've got a fleet management system and someone compromises your credentials, then can get into that fleet management system, they can do a lot of damage there. So you want to think about all the different ways in, and a lot of times that starts with the people. So you want to think about how you can raise cybersecurity awareness and help people be more mindful of what kind of links they're clicking on, what they're plugging into their computers, and do your research so you're buying from trusted sources. There's a lot of cost-effective things you can buy on Amazon, but they haven't necessarily earned the level of cyber trust that you would want when you're looking for something that gets connected to sensitive information.
Now, I think you've highlighted some of this, but specifically, what can business leaders do to mitigate these cyber risks that you've outlined? You've mentioned some of them, but maybe walk us through what you think a good plan would look like.
So there are a lot of different ways to approach this. One of the things I mentioned that is a key fundamental step here is an inventory of assets. You can't secure what you don't know you don't have. And in this age of digital infrastructure, it's easier and easier for your IT department to spin up a bunch of cloud resources and then forget everything that got launched. A lot of cyber attacks are targeting systems that people have forgotten, abandonware kind of a thing. So you got to know what you have in order to secure it. Another part of it is because a lot of this is people-oriented, you can try to implement technical solutions to have like automated technical securing of your systems, but you're always going to have a need for processes that people will have to follow. So you need to write those down, or people aren't going to follow them. You need to make sure that things are documented in a way that all the new employees, as part of onboarding, they know what the rules are, because you can't follow a rule you don't know exists. And if you're looking to do any work with like Department of Defense type organizations and you need more rigorous cybersecurity accreditation processes, you know they're going to be asking to look at that documentation. But overall, the best thing you can do to build cybersecurity into your organization is just raise the general awareness in cybersecurity culture. I think that anecdotal stories about cybersecurity are really impactful. They get people to think more about what's possible, because if you don't know what's possible, you can't really effectively stop it from happening to you.
Awesome. Well, part of that solution you mentioned was written policies. And so now I want to transition from training and programs to policies and what that looks like. Now, Tom, I know that you're a legal expert on this panel. So what legal exposure do businesses have if they choose not to have SMS or some sort of risk mitigation program in place?
Sure, happy to address that. And I'm going to be talking, I think, I'm going to try and make this broadly applicable. So it's not just airspace drones, but any ground-based autonomous system, underwater autonomous systems, I think all have the same basic concerns around what this panel is talking about in terms of the need for security and avoiding risks and managing risks, because, well, actually you can't avoid risks. You manage risks, and ideally you can identify them in advance and figure out how serious they are and then manage them appropriately. I'm also talking from the perspective of, I'm an attorney who works mostly with technology companies of all different types, including a couple of drone companies, but life sciences companies, people selling, working with all kinds of data. And I'm a retired Air Force officer, so I do have that sort of military operational experience. I've also been the CEO and the general counsel for a couple different tech startups. So kind of wrapping all those different perspectives into what I'm talking about. But I think John just did a really good job of teeing up many of the things that companies need to do to address their potential vulnerabilities around, we'll use cybersecurity, data, information security as kind of the thing to focus on here. And to be a successful business, you really need to have and by successful, I mean a business that makes money, is able to scale when opportunity allows, meaning you do more of the same thing or you expand into different areas. And ultimately, for most people who start businesses, their end result is they want to be able to sell that business at some point. Even my in-laws that run a cleaning business that they've chosen to run essentially as the lifestyle business for the last 30 years, they still want to be able to sell that business and retire. And to have something that people want to buy, you have to have a business that someone feels comfortable they can take and it will continue to generate value. Also, if you want to sell to certainly the government, but also to any kind of enterprise customer. So if you're providing a drone product or service that you want Walmart or Amazon to buy, or you want some large operator of physical infrastructure to use you to inspect their infrastructure, maybe make repairs, or somebody that wants you to collect data, maybe doing imagery that they then use and turn into some kind of product that they sell. In all of those cases, you're going to be asked as a vendor to prove that you have in place the appropriate security measures, practices. Policies are just the way you document all that and prove to people that you have taken the steps to ensure that you're addressing these concerns. It needs to be done in a way that's auditable so that someone can go and look under the hood and say, okay, you have a policy that says to do this. Do you actually follow that? Have you documented it? Do you have annual reviews that you've done? Do you run exercises? If I go and ask your employees, like, hey, your job is X, and these are the policies that apply to that role, tell me about the policies. Tell me about how you operate. Tell me when things go wrong. By not addressing and putting in place that sort of documentation, it greatly increases the risk of all sorts of bad things happening, from a data breach that could be basically an existential threat to just completely destroy a company in terms of its reputation, to losing major contracts with business customers or with the government because you can't meet their standards. And also, if you want to have insurance, or you want to get funding from a bank, or you want to raise outside capital, you're going to be always asked nowadays, show me your cybersecurity program, your policies, show me how you protect information security. And if you want customers who are going to, your product or service is going to either touch their data, touch their infrastructure, you're going to create data that goes to them, same thing. They're going to demand that you demonstrate that you have already implemented all the necessary security policy practices and policies and controls.
That's great. So let me ask this question. When should someone engage a lawyer? When are they talking to you?
Yeah, so I think when people actually engage lawyers is typically when something bad has happened or is about to happen, or otherwise, late in the game. So again, since I work with a lot of startups, there are things that are, everyone's afraid of spending money. Startups, they don't want to spend a lot of money. They think lawyers are going to be super expensive. They think that putting in place, any kind of compliance program or anything that addresses their cyber, security needs, for instance, is going to be really burdensome. They're just focused on, I got this idea, I want to turn it into a product, I need to get revenue, I need customers, and they don't want to think about, am I organizing my company in the right way? Should I be a corporation or an LLC or a sole proprietorship? So really, lawyers can add a ton of value at the very beginning of the process where you have an idea and you're ready to move to the phase of actually trying to field a product or get your first customers. Having the right corporate structure, having the right ownership structure. I talk to businesses all the time that it's 2 or 3 people coming together and they want to start the company. And I start asking questions like, okay, who owns what percentage? And they'll say, well, Bob's going to own 30%, Sue's going to own 40%. And I'm like, okay, how is that documented? Well, we'll get to that later, and right now we just want to focus on getting our product out there. And Bob has an LLC that he used for his tax business he used to have, and we're just going to put everything under that. And you start explaining to him, well, that means that Bob's LLC then owns everything, and Sue and Jim, they don't own anything. So at the very beginning of the process, there are so many important, crucial decisions that need to be made and made correctly so that later on you don't have to expend 5 times as much effort and money to try to fix them. But also as the business scales, and particularly again, if your ambition is to be a company that is selling to like enterprise, Fortune 500 type companies or the government, then the earlier, just like people talked about earlier, having security by design, where security is baked into your products and services, having a company that is run in a very efficient way with clear policies and procedures and practices from the beginning makes it much easier to start implementing things when your customers tell you, hey, if you want to do business with me, then you're going to be SOC 2 compliant, or you're going to have this particular accreditation. And it's a lot easier if you're already moving in that direction, or even better, have already done that before the customers tell you, and then all of a sudden, okay, wait, hit pause for 9 months while I figure out how to get myself from where I am today to being SOC 2 compliant. It also saves you from having to fill out these 500 question, 50-page long vendor security reviews. If you can just say, here's my SOC 2 certification that shows I've already checked the boxes on all the things that you care about.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, and I can speak from experience that it's a lot easier to plan for that right at the front end, because if you suddenly want to do a transaction or you have some major partner that you want to partner with, if you haven't done that, you're going to be in trouble, and because it doesn't happen overnight, no matter how good you are. That process of validating takes a long period of time, so your advice is spot on there. Well, what's the value add that lawyers can bring to the table when it comes to risk prevention and response?
Yeah, so I didn't have this perspective at the beginning of my legal career, but certainly after 30 years of practicing law in all sorts of different contexts, I've really realized, or I think that so much of what lawyers do is essentially risk management for their clients. And, it's more than that, but lawyers, I think, are uniquely situated to really understand how to think about a broad set of risks, legal risks, business risks, operational risks, and then help you, if you can know what your risks, your major risks are, you can identify the likelihood of the risk occurring, the severity of the risk occurring, and then you can make a decision about, is that something I decide to live with and accept, or is that something that I need to mitigate, or that I need to take some other kind of corrective action to address? Again, lawyers have this kind of holistic perspective that they can help you think through and navigate all those sorts of issues. That's why so many people that have roles in compliance or other sort of adjacent to legal practice areas in large companies are lawyers by training. It's a good skill set to be able to do a much broader set of things. And again, increasingly, if you want insurance, you want somebody to give you money, or you want somebody to be a customer, you're going to have in place some kind of approach to managing risk that you can show to them and demonstrate that I've actually done this. And again, I think pretty much every business use case that realistically comes up in the context of autonomous systems is going to involve something with the data, something with a customer's systems and infrastructure, and so the kinds of customers you're going to have in this space are going to expect you to have in place those sorts of risk management systems and controls.
That's right. And one thing I don't think, you may have mentioned this, is privilege. So if you run into a major problem, you're going to want those materials to be privileged, because When I work on a data breach, it's a mess. It's a big, hot mess. And you're getting information at different times, different things, and people are saying all sorts of things that they shouldn't say. And so if you have it at the direction of counsel and you have a lawyer engaged, it can give you privilege protection so that then ultimately you can kind of curate what you produce to the regulators when you have to find that. And you don't have that unless you have a lawyer on your team who's really helping you with leading the charge on that problem. So now you've heard about all the problems. There's a lot of problems. There's something that's super important that we're going to talk about next, and we're going to talk about insurance. Insurance can help when things go wrong and help you deal with the fallout. So, Alistair, your company works in the air taxi space for insurance. What unique risks does this sector pose?
Thank you so much. Insurance is everybody's favorite topic, isn't it?
It's my favorite.
That question is what I've spent the last 12 months trying to get to the bottom to. And if I can answer that question, I can then deploy tens of millions of dollars of insurance capacity with confidence that I know what I'm talking about in terms of the risk profile. So when it comes to the air taxi revolution, evolution, advanced air mobility, larger scale drones operating, the one thing I don't actually think is a big issue, which everyone thinks would be top of insurers' list, and it used to be 6 months ago when I started out, I thought this was the biggest issue, and now I don't, is the issue of insuring all of these different wacky novel airframe designs. You look across the spectrum of advanced air mobility and you think these things look so different. They look like they're from other planets. How are insurance underwriters going to insure things with 12 different rotors and some of them tilt and some of them don't, and they're different sizes, different motors, hybrid systems, hydrogen fuel cells inboard, even petrol generators, turbines inboard, power? How are we going to do that? And now I think, if there's a fundamental flaw in a type-certified airframe that causes it to crash, the cost of insurance is the least of our issues as an industry. I think we got bigger problems at that point. And so I've got sort of 5 things at the top of my list, which I think are the biggest challenges for insurance in this space. I'll just go through them quickly. I think the first is something to do with pilot adequacy and pilot training. Last 100 years of aviation insurance, one of the first questions you ask your customer as an underwriter is, what's your pilot experience? How many hours, make and model, type? Nobody's got any hours on eVTOLs. So we're going to have a new way of identifying how good a pilot is when we go and insure them. And then secondly, related to that, the issue of really highly automated avionics and flight control systems. I guess we all learned this lesson in the last few years from Boeing, where actually we have software on board the aircraft that is in some way battling against the pilot when it really matters. And that causes everybody big issues, particularly in the insurance space. And all of the eVTOLs, you have maybe a unified flight control system where the pilot input, you're not controlling individual control surfaces anymore, and there's no button to tilt that particular rotor forward. You're just putting a generic input in, and then the flight control system is doing its thing, and the aircraft goes where you want it to go. So we have that issue to try and tackle. And then the third thing related to that is the consolidation of products liability. So if you manufacture an aircraft, you would buy something called products liability insurance. So if you sell your aircraft to somebody and then it crashes, and it's found that the cause of the crash was something that you did wrong in the manufacturing phase, you're going to go after the products liability insurance. You're going to subrogate against that, and obviously the lawyers will help the clients do that. You subrogate against the product's liability. For the first time in, I think, about 75 years in aviation, some of these air taxi companies don't just want to build the aircraft and sell them, they want to operate the aircraft. And so from an insurance point of view, whereas we used to have all of the different manufacturers and the whole supply chain each buying their own insurance policy, and all of the money goes into a big pot at the bottom in the insurance market, and then the airline or the operator also buys their insurance policy, and you've got all this money at the bottom there to pay the claims. If you're going to build the aircraft and most of the components in-house and operate them in urban environments and hundreds of flights in a week, where's the insurance premium going to come from? It's going to have to be made up somewhere. So the consolidation of products liability, number 3. Fourth thing, which touched on, I think this will come maybe in a few years, but is a potential cyber aggregation exposure for the insurance market, which could have implications on the reinsurance side. We've not really seen this in aviation before, but if you've got tens of aircraft in an urban environment that are being controlled by some sort of central system, and there's a malicious attack on that system, you've potentially got one proximate cause that leads to the loss of multiple aircraft at the same time. Is that one occurrence? Is it multiple occurrences? How does the insurance market respond to that? And how do we price that exposure given that we could have multiple aircraft in an event? And then the last thing, and this is the one that keeps me up at night, somebody said to me about 4 months ago at an eVTOL conference, I was telling them I was doing insurance, and they said, you do realize that you're not going to be an aviation underwriter anymore, you're going to be a battery underwriter. That's your big issue. Thermal runaway, I asked a battery manufacturer in San Francisco, I asked him, is thermal runaway preventable or is it inevitable in the air taxi arena? He said it's inevitable. It's going to happen. You just got to know what to do when it happens. So that's a big issue for me as an underwriter. If it's possible to measure current and voltage and temperature and resistance at the cell level in an aircraft battery, and people decide not to do that because it carries a weight penalty or a cost penalty, that's an issue from the underwriting point of view. We want people to make those decisions even if it does impact speed, range, payload. They're the 5 things that keep me up at night.
Who knew that the insurance panelist would scare us the most today? All right. Well, what are the kinds of insurance that folks need to have in place in order to have this protection?
Yeah, briefly, insurance is, well, the difference between a broker and underwriter. If you want to buy insurance, you generally go to a broker, and the broker would approach the underwriters on your behalf to try and get you the best deal. And they might need to go to multiple different underwriters. If it's an airline, one insurance company isn't going to insure a whole airline. They might do a 5% of the risk or 10%. And so the broker's job is to go and fill it up to 100%, so you've got the whole risk insured. I'm on the underwriting side, so we founded this company 12 months ago. And we are dedicated in our insurance capacity to emerging aviation technology. So we don't do any conventional risks. The types of insurance, hull insurance is the insurance for the loss of or physical damage to the aircraft itself. And then everything else comes under third-party liability. And that goes into lots of different areas of the aviation industry. You're obviously flying your aircraft. If it crashes, you can have damage to third-party property or people. If you're building an aircraft, you have third-party liability exposure because you're selling it to people. If you're maintaining an aircraft, you have third-party liability exposure. If you're hangaring an aircraft, you have third-party liability exposure. That's the 2 main types of insurance. Aviation insurance is split into general aviation, airlines, and aerospace. So there are 3 pillars in aviation insurance. Airlines and general aviation is the operators and the airlines themselves, insuring the fleets of aircraft for the hull and third-party liability. Aerospace insurance is everything in the aviation industry that doesn't fly, which is quite a lot of stuff. Airports don't fly, manufacturers don't fly. The things they build fly, but they don't fly themselves. That's the sort of way to think about insurance.
That's great. Well, what sort of tips or lessons have you learned from the drone industry or the air taxi industry that you could share with us?
One big thing, I call the Friday afternoon problem, which is common in aviation insurance, in that somebody will ring up, a broker will ring up and say, oh, we need to insure this aircraft. And it's Friday afternoon, it's 5 o'clock, you're ready to go home. And they say, oh, it's pretty urgent. You say, how urgent is it? They say, I've got the client on the other line and they're on the runway. And they need That's the Friday afternoon problem. There's a chance that we could be walking into that problem as a whole industry, and that the air taxi, eVTOL drone industry is ready to go with BVLOS operations at scale, and then suddenly on the Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, we approach the insurance market and expect them to be okay with everything. The way to solve that problem is to invite insurers to things like this. So it's wonderful to be here. And just to be chatting to the whole industry, I'd tell everyone involved in the advanced air mobility space to include the insurers at a really early stage. Even if you're not buying insurance, an insurance underwriter is going to love a visit to the manufacturing facility, meet the engineers, become much more comfortable with the risk profile before we actually have to put millions of dollars of capital at risk.
Great. Well, this was fantastic. So let's give the final remarks. So no pressure here, and let's pass the mic down here. We're going to start with you, Don, or Tom. I mean, let's start with Tom on this end. Tell us what your best tip is, or your takeaway that you want everyone here to know about what can go wrong and how to protect from mayhem.
Sure. Well, this is somewhat of a shameless plug for lawyers, but you should invest the time and effort in finding good legal services at the beginning of your journey as a company. And ideally, then having a lawyer who can work with you to help you grow and go along that entire journey from the founding of a company to the ultimate, end point, which ideally, again, is in most people's eyes is a startup. Either we go public or we get bought out by somebody who pays us a ton of money, and then we just go and hang out on the beach for the rest of our lives. But lawyers, come in all stripes and colors. As you've heard today, lots of different specializations, and lawyers are not necessarily super expensive. Most of us are actually pretty nice people and easy to talk to. And so again, don't be. I talk to so many people that are just scared because they think if I go to a lawyer, it's going to be super expensive. It's going to make things really complicated. If that's what the lawyer offers you, then that's not the right lawyer for you. There's plenty of people that can help you solve your problems and do it in a way that's affordable. And also, again, we're like law firms that are focused on working with startups. We tend to be very flexible in how we approach things with, with companies that have little or no revenue to help them get where they need to be so that they can have revenue later on.
Great. All right, pass that mic down, John.
I think what the lawyers and insurers have said is true for cybersecurity as well. You want to have it early. It is far cheaper in terms of cost and time to secure systems early than to have to patch them once you found a problem down the road. And that applies both for the people developing these systems as well as the people developing operational processes to use them. Also, just stop clicking links in emails. Like, no one ever actually wins a vacation getaway.
Great.
So if you or your company is using weather information to make decisions and you're getting the information free, you're getting exactly what you pay for. It's nothing. It costs nothing. It's free. Not all weather forecasters, not all weather creatures are created the same. Not all weather companies are created the same. And I encourage you to, if you are a personal consumer or your company is a consumer of weather information, don't presume that we're all getting it from the same satellite or the same computer model or the same this or that. Do a little due diligence, look closely at the backgrounds of the people involved, ask for data, because all weather people are not created equal.
So back to safety management systems, I think what's key to what I think everybody on the panel is saying is foundations are core to any solid infrastructure. You got to start somewhere, and a lot of folks say, crawl, walk, run, and I think that's really important to an industry that, again, it's very much aviation. It's regulated by aviation, but it's a merging of a lot of different cultures coming into the space, whether it's hobbyists, recreational, technologists, DoD, aviators. We've heard from all sorts of backgrounds coming into today. It's a combined culture that's making up the drone industry, and it is a village. Somebody mentioned earlier, kind of a village of a lot of different organizations that make it run. It's key to have foundations and premise them on the risk profile of both the operation itself and the size and complexity of the aircraft. You're really looking at an operation from a risk perspective. And then if you're a student in the room looking at getting into this space, I can't say enough great things about the drone industry in terms of the opportunities on the entrepreneurial side to build and identify issues that exist inside of different segments of the industry, because there are plenty of issues that need fixing. It's a great opportunity for entrepreneurial and developing solutions to fill these voids that exist within that village or that ecosystem of companies and pieces.
Insurance is much more fun than people give it credit for. And my final word would be that if you're operating in the UAS space or the advanced air mobility space, you want to be working with a broker and underwriter who is an enthusiast in this space and wants it to work and is investing their career in the future of this industry.
1,000%. Thank you. Let's give a huge round of applause to our great panelists today. Thank you. You can reach us all, look at the QR code, and please feel free to reach out.